My name is Avery Mitchell, 27, and I never thought I'd be sitting at my sister's wedding reception with nothing but stale bread on my plate while everyone else enjoyed filet mignon. As a professional videographer hired to capture Stephanie's perfect day, I'd spent months swallowing her insults and demands. Years of being the family disappointment had prepared me for this moment, watching my parents laugh alongside her as the server placed the dry crust before me. Little did they know I'd prepared 2 wedding videos, the fairy tale they expected and the truth they deserved. In exactly 47 minutes, all 200 guests would fall silent as my real gift to the happy couple played on the giant screen. Before I tell you how this all unfolded, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been served the metaphorical dry bread in your family while watching others feast. Growing up as the second Mitchell daughter meant living in Stephanie's shadow. From the moment she was born when I was 3, my parents' attention shifted so dramatically it was like someone had flipped a switch. Diana and Grant Mitchell were pillars of our local community in Burlington, Vermont, my father a respected surgeon and my mother the perfect doctor's wife who channeled her former marketing executive skills into crafting the ideal family image. Stephanie fit that image perfectly. By age 5, she was winning beauty pageants with her golden curls and dimpled smile. In middle school, she became class president and star athlete. High school brought cheerleading captain, homecoming queen, and valedictorian accolades. My parents' living room transformed into a shrine to Stephanie's achievements, trophies, medals, and framed certificates covering every surface while my academic certificates and photography contest wins gathered dust in a drawer. "Avery, why can't you put down that camera and join a real activity?" my mother would ask during my teenage years. "Colleges don't give scholarships for taking pictures." This criticism came despite the fact I'd already won 3 national youth photography competitions and been published in 2 magazines by 16. When I got accepted to NYU's prestigious Tisch School of the Arts for film studies, my parents barely acknowledged it. "It's not a practical degree," my father said dismissively. That same night, they threw a lavish party when Stephanie got into Yale, despite her lower GPA and fewer extracurriculars. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. The pattern continued throughout college. While I worked 3 jobs to cover expenses my parents refused to help with, Stephanie enjoyed a fully funded apartment in New Haven, complete with new furniture and weekly spending allowances. During one particularly painful Thanksgiving break, Stephanie borrowed my portfolio containing months of work for a major project. When she returned it 2 days later, coffee had mysteriously spilled on half my photographs. My mother's response, "You shouldn't have left it where it could get damaged." Then came the boyfriend incident. Senior year of college, I'd been dating Ryan for 8 months, the first guy who truly supported my creative aspirations. When I brought him home for Christmas, Stephanie decided he was an upgrade from her current boyfriend. By New Year's, she'd manipulated the situation so thoroughly that Ryan was convinced I was too focused on my career to care about him. He broke up with me January 2nd. By Valentine's Day, he and Stephanie were officially a couple. When I confronted her, she simply said, "If your relationship had been stronger, this wouldn't have happened." My parents, of course, thought they made a lovely couple. After graduation, I built my videography business from nothing in New York City, refusing any connection to my family name or contacts. Starting with small gigs, engagement shoots and corporate events, I gradually built a reputation for cinematic, emotionally resonant videos. By 26, I had a waiting list of clients and had shot campaigns for several recognizable brands. All without a single word of encouragement from my family, who still referred to my thriving business as Avery's little movie hobby. For 3 blessed years, I maintained minimal contact, holiday texts and occasional brief calls. Then came the announcement: Stephanie was engaged to James Hartwell, heir to a hotel development fortune and exactly the type of man my mother had always envisioned for her favorite daughter. The predictable call followed. "Avery, darling, you simply must do Stephanie's wedding video," my mother cooed through the phone. "No one else would capture it properly, and you know your sister has always admired your little films." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Mother, I charge $15,000 for wedding packages now." My schedule is booked 8 months out. Don't be ridiculous. We're family. You can't possibly charge your sister, and you'll need to clear your schedule. The wedding's in 6 months, June 15th. When I explained that canceling existing clients would damage my professional reputation, she pulled out the familiar guilt tactics. After everything we've done for you? Your sister only gets married once. Unless you want to finally prove you really are as selfish as we've always worried. That manipulation, the subtle reminder that they considered me fundamentally flawed, was so familiar it made my stomach turn. Yet somehow, it still worked. I agreed to film the wedding, but insisted on a formal contract with clear boundaries. My mother agreed verbally, then conveniently forgot to sign anything once I'd committed. Little did I know, this would be just the beginning of 6 months of wedding-related humiliation that would ultimately lead to the dry bread incident and what happened after. The 6 months leading up to Stephanie and James's wedding became an exercise in escalating disrespect. What started with my mother forgetting to sign my contract quickly devolved into treating me as an unpaid servant rather than a professional or family member. The engagement party in December set the tone. While I'd expected to attend as a guest, I arrived to find my mother had told everyone I would be practicing by photographing the event. No heads up, no discussion, just an assumption that my time and skills were at the family's disposal. When I objected, my mother pulled me aside. "Don't embarrass me, Avery," she hissed. "The Hartwells are here. Do you know James's father sits on the board of 3 major companies? These connections could finally give you a real career." "I have a real career," I replied, but she had already walked away. January brought the engagement photo shoot, which Stephanie insisted I do despite having hired renowned photographer Brandon Walsh for the wedding itself. When I arrived at the Central Park location we'd agreed upon, Stephanie texted that they'd decided to shoot in the Hamptons instead, a 3-hour drive away. I arrived to find them already 2 hours into a shoot with another photographer. "Oh good, you're finally here," Stephanie said, not bothering to introduce me to the Hartwells. "Brandon had to leave, but we still need some casual shots. Maybe by that tree?" I spent 4 hours shooting, only to have Stephanie dismiss every image. "These just don't capture our essence," she said, scrolling through my carefully edited portfolio. "Maybe photography isn't really your medium after all. February's cake tasting should have been simple." I was just documenting, not participating. But when I arrived at the exclusive Manhattan bakery, Stephanie's 6 bridesmaids were there, all shooting me looks of disdain. "Oh, Avery," bridesmaid Caitlin said with fake sympathy, "Stephanie told us all about your situation." When I asked what situation, she whispered, "The weight thing. And the jealousy issues. Don't worry, we understand." Later, I overheard Stephanie telling James's mother that I had always struggled with appropriate boundaries and had crashed her engagement party demanding to be the photographer. The lies were so brazen I nearly confronted her then and there, but years of conditioning made me swallow my words. March brought the bridal shower, where I was again relegated to documentation duty rather than included as a sister. When gift opening time came, my carefully selected vintage camera collection, pieces I'd spent years curating, was opened last and barely acknowledged. "How unique," my mother said dismissively. Though perhaps not quite right for the gift table display. I watched as Stephanie later gifted one of the cameras to a bridesmaid who had admired it, as if it were a party favor rather than a meaningful gift from her sister. April was when the idea of revenge began to take shape. While searching for equipment in my childhood bedroom closet during a rare visit home, I discovered my old diaries. Flipping through them revealed detailed accounts of Stephanie's manipulations and my parents' enabling behavior, incidents I'd half convinced myself I was exaggerating in memory. But there they were, documented in my teenage handwriting, complete with dates and exact quotes. That same weekend, I overheard Stephanie and James discussing the wedding video. "Don't worry about Avery's feelings," Stephanie was saying. "We'll get a real videographer for the important parts. She can handle the boring stuff no one cares about." Something inside me snapped. That night, I began reaching out to people from our past, former friends, distant relatives, exes, anyone who had witnessed Stephanie's behavior firsthand. To my surprise, many were eager to talk. I set up discreet interviews, collecting testimony about the real Stephanie Mitchell that no one in our polished social circle acknowledged. May brought the final straw. My mother insisted I attend a fitting for the bridesmaid dress Stephanie had selected for me, a deliberately unflattering mustard yellow gown with an empire waist that made me look 6 months pregnant. "It's perfect," Stephanie declared as I stood uncomfortably before the mirror. "The color really brings out your complexion." The seamstress, an older woman named Maria, caught my eye with sympathy. Later, as she pinned the dress, she whispered, "I can alter this to flatter you better. Your sister won't notice." That small kindness from a stranger contrasted so sharply with my family's cruelty that I nearly cried. As I left the boutique, Stephanie casually mentioned she'd decided not to pay me for the wedding video after all, since I was getting such great exposure to the Hartwell's wealthy friends. That night, I made my decision. I would create 2 videos, the fairy tale wedding video they expected, and a second video, one that would expose 27 years of painful truth to everyone who mattered to them. As June approached, I worked methodically, gathering footage, planning my approach, and preparing technically to ensure my truth video would be unstoppable once it began. All while smiling through final dress fittings, the rehearsal dinner where I was seated next to the kitchen doors, and my mother's constant criticism of everything from my hair to my choice of camera equipment. The stage was set. The wedding day arrived. And with it, the dry bread incident that would be the final push I needed. June 15th dawned bright and clear. Perfect weather for the lavish outdoor ceremony at the Hartwell family estate in the Hamptons. I arrived at 7 a.m., hauling equipment while the bridal party still slept off the rehearsal dinner champagne. By the time Stephanie and her bridesmaids emerged at 9:30, I had already set up 4 camera positions, checked audio levels, and coordinated with the hired photographer. "God, Avery, could you be any more in the way?" Stephanie snapped as I adjusted a light stand. "And what are you wearing? You look like the help." I was wearing a professional black dress appropriate for someone who would be working behind the scenes all day. My bridesmaid dress hung in a garment bag, ready for the ceremony. "I'll change before the ceremony," I assured her. "Just focusing on getting everything ready for your perfect day." My mother swooped in, champagne flute already in hand at 10 a.m. "Avery, darling, could you run to town and pick up more bobby pins?" Caitlin forgot hers. The salon was 30 minutes away, meaning an hour round trip that would put me behind schedule. "Mom, I need to finish setting up the ceremony site." "Can't someone else go?" "Everyone else is busy with important wedding preparations," she replied, the implication clear. My work wasn't important. I sent my assistant instead, earning a glare from my mother and whispers among the bridesmaids about my attitude problem. At noon, while doing final audio checks in the bridal suite, I overheard Stephanie talking to her maid of honor, Melissa. "Did you talk to the catering staff?" Stephanie asked. "All set," Melissa replied with a giggle. "Operation Put Avery in Her Place is ready to go. Your mom approved it too." Before I could process this, Stephanie turned and accidentally bumped into me, spilling her mimosa down the front of my dress. "Oh my God, I'm so clumsy," she exclaimed with exaggerated dismay. "You'd better get cleaned up before the ceremony." "Good thing no one will really be looking at you anyway." I changed into my bridesmaid dress early, missing lunch as I scrambled to clean my equipment and ensure everything was still working properly. By the time the 3 p.m. ceremony arrived, I was hungry, frustrated, and more determined than ever to follow through with my plan. The ceremony itself went perfectly. I captured every tender moment between Stephanie and James with professional precision, including their personalized vows where Stephanie promised honesty and faithfulness above all else. If only the guests knew how ironic those words were. At the reception, I discovered the first part of Operation Put Avery in Her Place. Despite being both the bride's sister and the videographer, I was not seated at the family table. Instead, I found my name card at the far back of the tent, at a small table with the band's sound technician and the venue's maintenance staff. "There must be a mistake," I said to the wedding planner, who looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, these are the final arrangements approved by the bride and her mother," she replied, avoiding my eyes. I set up my equipment for the reception coverage, then took my assigned seat just as dinner service began. That's when the second part of their plan revealed itself. While every other table received elegant plates of filet mignon, roasted vegetables, and truffle mashed potatoes, the server placed before me a plate containing nothing but 2 slices of stale bread. No butter. No sides. Just dry bread. "I'm sorry, there must be a mistake with my order," I said to the server. He leaned down and whispered, "I was specifically instructed that this is what goes to table 19, seat 3. "I'm really sorry." As I looked up in disbelief, I caught Stephanie and my mother watching from the head table, poorly concealing their laughter behind napkins. James looked confused, asking Stephanie something that made her wave dismissively. I maintained my composure, continuing to work as I circulated the room with my camera. Near the kitchen, I overheard 2 servers talking. "Did you see that poor girl's face? Just bread? That's beyond mean." The bride insisted. Said something about teaching her sister a lesson about knowing her place. The final blow came during Stephanie's speech. After thanking her parents and James's family, she turned her attention to me. "And my sister Avery, always hiding behind her camera." Polite laughter from the crowd. "Some might say she's been filming my life since we were kids because her own wasn't interesting enough to live." More uncomfortable laughter. But hey, at least she found a way to attend events she'd never be invited to otherwise. That moment crystallized 27 years of mistreatment into perfect clarity. As I kept my camera steady, I made eye contact with Maria, the seamstress who had kindly altered my dress. She was now working as one of the event staff and had witnessed everything. She gave me a small nod that somehow contained both understanding and permission. It was time. The bread incident wasn't just another humiliation. It was the final confirmation that my family would never see me as worthy of basic dignity. As the reception moved into dancing and the alcohol flowed freely, I quietly finalized preparations for the video reveal that would change everything. By 9 p.m., the reception was in full swing. The dance floor pulsed with energy as the open bar worked its magic on the 200 elite guests. Stephanie and James had just finished their elaborately choreographed first dance to Perfect by Ed Sheeran, a performance they'd hired a professional dancer to teach them over 6 weekends. I had been methodically capturing every moment as the consummate professional, giving no indication of what was about to happen. The DJ announced it was time for the father-daughter dance, and my father led Stephanie onto the floor as guests circled around them. This was my moment. I approached the DJ booth, wedding coordinator clipboard in hand. "Small change to the timeline," I said confidently. After this dance, the bride and groom requested their video tribute be played before the cake cutting. "It's all queued up." The DJ, who had been dealing with my mother and Stephanie's constant timeline adjustments all night, simply nodded. "Whatever they want, man." I connected my laptop to the venue system, bypassing the simple slideshow the wedding planner expected. As the father-daughter dance concluded to applause, I took the DJ's microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "As Stephanie's sister and videographer, I've prepared a special tribute video celebrating the bride and groom. If everyone could direct their attention to the screens." The massive projector screens on either side of the dance floor illuminated as the lights dimmed. Stephanie and James took their seats at the head table, champagne glasses in hand, smiling expectantly. The video began exactly as they anticipated. A beautifully edited montage of ceremony highlights set to their favorite song. Cinematic shots of Stephanie walking down the aisle, their first kiss as husband and wife, guests wiping away tears during the vows. For 3 minutes, it was everything a wedding video should be. Then came the transition no one expected. The screen faded to black. When the image returned, teenage Stephanie appeared, secretly filmed as she rifled through my desk, pulling out a college application essay. The timestamp in the corner showed this was from 2013. Stephanie could be clearly heard saying, "Avery actually thinks she's getting that NYU scholarship. Not if her application mysteriously arrives damaged." Gasps echoed through the tent. Stephanie's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. The video continued, methodically revealing 2 decades of recorded evidence I'd gathered, some from my own archives, others from interviews conducted over the past months. There was Stephanie at Christmas 5 years ago, bragging to her friends, "My parents bought me a car, but I told them Avery needs one more. They're getting her a used Honda while I'm getting a BMW. She'll be so pathetically grateful for their scraps." Then came clips from the wedding planning, Stephanie and my mother laughing as they discussed seating arrangements. "Put Avery with the help," my mother suggested. "She needs to remember her place in this family. And make sure they only serve her bread," Stephanie added. "Tell them it's a family joke." Next appeared footage of James's groomsmen at the rehearsal dinner, with Stephanie telling them I was mentally unstable and to humor me if I tried to talk to them. The most damning segment featured Stephanie and James arguing 2 months before the wedding. "You were with her again, weren't you?" James demanded. Stephanie's tearful denial was contradicted by the next clip. Security footage from a hotel showing Stephanie entering a room with her ex-boyfriend just 3 weeks before the wedding. The tent had fallen completely silent. 200 guests sat frozen, champagne glasses midair, forks suspended above half-eaten cake. My mother had risen halfway from her seat, mouth open in horror, while my father stared at the ground. James had gone pale, his hands gripping the table edge. "Someone stop this immediately," my mother finally shrieked, rushing toward the DJ booth. But I had anticipated this. The system was locked, the video programmed to continue regardless of which cable they yanked out. I had backup projectors hidden around the tent, ready to activate if the main ones were somehow disabled. The final minutes of the video featured recent interviews. Ryan, the boyfriend Stephanie had stolen, describing how she'd admitted it was all a game to her. Former friends revealing how Stephanie had spread rumors about them when they became too popular. Even James's sister admitting she'd overheard Stephanie mocking James's pathetic proposal to her friends. The video concluded with a simple message on screen: "Congratulations on your perfect day. The truth will set you free." As the screens went dark, the silence was absolute. 200 guests, business associates of my father, social elites my mother had cultivated relationships with for decades, James's wealthy family members, all sat in stunned silence. Then came the whispers, rising in volume like a wave. Stephanie stood up, her face contorted with rage. "You pathetic, jealous bitch," she screamed, lunging toward me. But something had changed. For the first time in my life, I didn't flinch at her attack. I stood my ground as James caught her arm, his expression a mixture of disgust and disbelief. "Is it true?" he asked her, his voice carrying in the silence. "Were you with Michael at the Thompson Hotel?" The look on Stephanie's face confirmed everything. The perfect wedding had shattered. And in that moment, watching the carefully constructed facade of our family crumble, I felt neither joy nor regret, only a profound sense of finally being free. Chaos erupted in the reception tent. Stephanie broke free from James's grip and lunged at me again, her designer gown catching on a chair and ripping at the seam. 2 of James's brothers intercepted her before she could reach me, restraining her as she screamed obscenities. "You've ruined everything," she shrieked, mascara streaming down her face. This was my day. Mine. Guests began rising from their tables, some rushing for the exits while others stood frozen, smartphones discreetly recording the meltdown. The Hartwell family huddled in urgent conversation, James's father's face purple with anger, though it wasn't clear if his rage was directed at Stephanie or the public embarrassment. My mother recovered her composure first, rushing to the DJ booth and grabbing the microphone. "A technical difficulty, everyone," she announced with a brittle laugh. "Too much champagne for the videographer, I'm afraid. Please enjoy another round of drinks while we sort this out." But her attempt at damage control came too late. Mrs. Hartwell, James's mother, approached her with ice in her eyes. "Diana, I think we need to speak privately." Now. James himself stood apart from everyone, still at the head table, staring at his new wife with the dawning realization that he'd married a stranger. When he finally moved, it was toward me, not Stephanie. "The hotel footage," he said quietly. "You're sure it's real?" I nodded. "Timestamp security footage from 3 weeks ago." "I'm sorry, James." He swallowed hard. "Don't be. Better to know now than 10 years and 2 kids later." He looked back at Stephanie, still struggling against his brother's grip. "I need a copy of that video for my lawyer." My father had remained seated throughout the initial chaos, staring into his whiskey glass. When I passed his table, he finally looked up. I expected anger, perhaps even hatred. Instead, I saw something I'd never witnessed in his eyes before when directed at me: respect. "You've been planning this for months," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." He nodded slowly. "That took precision. And patience." He drained his glass. "Qualities I never gave you credit for." Before I could respond, the venue manager appeared at my elbow. "Miss Mitchell, we need you to leave the premises. Security has been called." I had anticipated this too. My equipment was already packed, my car keys in my pocket. The most important footage, both the damning video and the evidence behind it, was backed up to 3 separate devices and a cloud server. As I was escorted out, I passed the staff table where I'd been seated. The maintenance man stood and gave me a subtle nod of approval. The band sound technician whispered, legendary, as I walked by. Small validations, but they meant more than they should have. Outside, the warm June air felt cleansing after the toxic atmosphere of the tent. I could still hear Stephanie's screams as security guards surrounded my car. I drove away from the Hartwell estate for the last time, hands steady on the wheel despite the adrenaline coursing through me. 3 miles down the road, I pulled over at a scenic overlook facing the ocean. For the first time in hours, I allowed myself to breathe. My phone had already begun vibrating continuously in my purse, texts, calls, and notifications flooding in. I switched it to airplane mode without checking a single message. Instead, I stepped out of the car and walked to the edge of the overlook. The moon cast a silver path across the water. I hadn't planned what would happen after the video reveal, had been so focused on the execution that I hadn't thought beyond that moment of truth. Now, watching the distant lights of boats on the horizon, I realized I had just burned my family bridges beyond repair. Yet instead of anxiety or regret, I felt an unfamiliar lightness. The weight of decades of emotional abuse had lifted, replaced by something that felt dangerously close to peace. I checked into a small oceanfront motel using cash, took a long shower, and slept dreamlessly for 10 hours straight, the first truly restful sleep I'd had since Stephanie's engagement announcement. When I woke the next morning, I finally turned my phone back on. It nearly exploded with notifications, 112 missed calls, 247 text messages, and countless social media alerts. Most were from numbers I didn't recognize, though several were from family members and wedding guests. I scrolled through them selectively. James had texted simply, "I've contacted my lawyer. Thank you for the truth." My father had called 7 times but left no messages. My mother's texts evolved from rage, "How could you do this to your sister?" to bargaining, "We can fix this if you issue a retraction immediately," to surprisingly vulnerable by 4 a.m., "Please call me, Avery. We need to talk." Most surprising were messages from relatives and acquaintances I barely knew, many expressing variations of, "We always saw how they treated you, and it's about time someone stood up to them." By noon, clips from my video had begun circulating online, despite my never having shared them publicly. Someone at the wedding had apparently recorded the screens with their phone. Stephanie's name was trending locally on Twitter. I switched my phone back to airplane mode, packed my overnight bag, and checked out of the motel. It was time to return to New York, to my real life and the business I'd built without my family's help or approval. Whatever consequences awaited, I would face them on my own terms, no longer accepting scraps from their table or dry bread at their feast. The week following the wedding was like watching a controlled demolition from a safe distance. I returned to my Brooklyn apartment and immediately hired a lawyer, anticipating potential legal action from my family or the Hartwells. My attorney, Natalie, reviewed the evidence behind my video and assured me I was on solid ground. Everything I'd shown was either legally obtained by me or voluntarily provided by interviewees. They might threaten lawsuits, she explained, but they won't follow through. A court case would only make the evidence more public. She was right. The cease and desist letter from my parents' lawyer arrived 3 days after the wedding, demanding I retract all false statements and issue a public apology. My response, drafted by Natalie, was simple: truth is an absolute defense against defamation claims. No further legal communications followed. Social media told the story my family tried to suppress. The hashtag wedding video revenge had gained traction, with clips from my video spreading despite continuous copyright claims from my mother's social media team. Stephanie and James's honeymoon to the Maldives had been cancelled, with James reportedly flying directly to his family's home in Connecticut instead. On day 4, my father called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Avery," he said, his voice sounding older than I remembered. "We need to talk." "I think we've said everything that needs saying, Dad." "No." A heavy pause. "I haven't said anything. That's the problem." We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop in Manhattan, public enough that no one would cause a scene. When I arrived, I barely recognized him. The confident surgeon who had intimidated me my entire life looked deflated, with dark circles under his eyes and new lines etched into his face. "Your mother and I are separating," he said after ordering his coffee. "Temporarily, at least." I hadn't expected this. Because of the video? Because of what the video revealed. He stared into his cup. "I've spent 27 years enabling behavior I knew was wrong. Watching that footage." He struggled for words. "It was like seeing our family through someone else's eyes for the first time. I tried to tell you how she treated me," I said quietly. "4 years." He nodded. "I know. I convinced myself you were exaggerating. That siblings always feel rivalry. That your mother was just enthusiastic about Stephanie's achievements." He looked up at me. "I was wrong, Avery. And I'm sorry." The apology I'd waited my entire life to hear landed with surprising emptiness. "Why now, Dad? Why not when I was 16 and Stephanie sabotaged my photography portfolio? Or when Mom told me my degree was worthless? Or any of the 1,000 other times?" "Because I was a coward," he admitted. "It was easier to have peace at home than to confront the truth." We talked for 2 hours. The longest real conversation we'd ever had. He revealed that my mother had been in crisis mode since the wedding, calling in favors to suppress the video online and crafting a narrative about me being mentally unstable. Stephanie had moved back home, her new marriage already on life support as James pursued an annulment. "She's not handling it well," my father said. "She blames everyone but herself." "That sounds familiar," I replied. As we prepared to leave, he hesitated. "Your extended family has been calling. Your Aunt Sarah, Uncle Mark, your cousins. They've all seen parts of the video. And they want to reconnect with you. Sarah said she tried to tell your mother years ago that her treatment of you was inappropriate, but Diana cut her off. There are people who care about you, Avery. People who saw what was happening but didn't know how to help." This revelation, that others had seen the truth all along, triggered something unexpected. That night, I received emails and messages from relatives I'd barely spoken to in years. My mother's sister Sarah wrote a particularly moving note. "I've watched you withdraw from family gatherings over the years, and I understood why. Diana and I fought about her treatment of you many times. I should have tried harder to maintain our relationship independent of her. If you're willing, I'd love to have my niece back in my life." By the second week, professional consequences began emerging. Stephanie had been placed on administrative leave from her executive position at a marketing firm after colleagues connected her real personality with recent workplace conflicts. My mother's carefully cultivated social standing suffered as 3 charity boards asked her to step down quietly. Most surprisingly, my videography business saw an unprecedented surge in inquiries. While some were obviously disaster tourists hoping to witness another takedown, legitimate clients reached out after seeing the technical quality of my work in the viral clips. An HBO documentary producer contacted me about potentially collaborating on a project about family dynamics. James filed for annulment 17 days after the wedding, citing fraud and misrepresentation. When his lawyer contacted me requesting evidence for the case, I provided only what directly pertained to Stephanie's infidelity, refusing to be weaponized in their legal battle despite my feelings about my sister. The most unexpected call came from Melissa, Stephanie's maid of honor and lifelong friend. "I owe you an apology," she said hesitantly. "I've been enabling Stephanie's behavior for years because it was easier than standing up to her." Watching that video was like seeing myself through different eyes. By the 1-month mark, my mother finally reached out directly rather than through lawyers or my father. Her email was surprisingly subdued. "Avery, while I cannot condone your actions at the wedding, I recognize that certain aspects of our family dynamic may have contributed to your feelings of resentment. Your father and I are in family counseling, and our therapist has suggested it might be beneficial for us to eventually have a mediated conversation. Please consider this possibility for the future. Mom." The careful wording, the subtle shifting of blame to my feelings of resentment rather than their actions, the formal signature, it was so typically my mother that I actually laughed out loud. Still, the mention of therapy represented more self-reflection than I'd ever witnessed from her. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life without the shadow of family dysfunction hanging over me. For the first time, I could pursue my career and personal relationships without the constant undertow of Stephanie's sabotage or my parents' disapproval. 6 weeks after the wedding, as media interest finally began to fade, I received a hand-delivered letter from Stephanie. Unlike my mother's carefully worded email, this was written on tear-stained paper with uncharacteristically messy handwriting. "I hate you for what you did. I hate that everyone saw who I really am. I hate that James left me. I hate that my life is ruined. But most of all, I hate that I can't deny any of it was true. I don't know how to be the person everyone wants me to be now. I don't know how to be anyone except who I've always been." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even particularly reflective. But it was honest, perhaps the first honest communication from my sister in our entire lives. I didn't reply, but I didn't throw the letter away either. As summer faded into fall, the immediate crisis subsided into a new normal. My parents continued their separation, with my father surprisingly emerging as someone interested in building a genuine relationship with me. My extended family became an unexpected source of support. And Stephanie reportedly entered intensive therapy at a facility in Arizona, though whether from genuine desire for change or image rehabilitation remained to be seen. The wedding video that had shattered our family's facade had also, ironically, created the possibility for something more authentic to eventually take its place. Whether that would happen remained to be seen, but for the first time in my life, I was approaching family relationships on my own terms, no longer accepting dry bread when I deserved a seat at the full table. The months following the wedding incident became a period of profound personal reconstruction. Having spent 27 years defining myself in relation to my family, specifically in opposition to Stephanie, I now faced the disorienting freedom of self-definition without that framework. "It's like you've been climbing a mountain your whole life," my therapist, Dr. Rahman, observed during our 3rd session. "You finally reached the summit, only to discover there's an entire landscape beyond you never considered." I'd started therapy 2 weeks after the wedding, recognizing that while exposing my family's dysfunction had been necessary, healing from it would require professional guidance. In our weekly sessions, I grappled with complicated emotions, vindication without joy, liberation tinged with grief, anger without a clear target now that accountability had begun. I should feel triumphant, I admitted during one particularly difficult session. I finally stood up for myself. I have proof I wasn't crazy or too sensitive all these years. So why do I sometimes wake up feeling like I've lost something? Because you have, Dr. Rahman replied gently. You've lost the possibility of having the family you deserved all along. Acknowledging that truth is painful, even when it's necessary. This perspective shift helped me recognize that my feelings weren't contradictory but complementary, different facets of processing long-term emotional abuse. I could feel both relieved at breaking free and sad about needing to do so. I could be proud of my courage while acknowledging the pain that necessitated it. With this understanding came the difficult work of establishing boundaries. My father's attempts at reconciliation seemed genuine, but decades of passive enabling couldn't be erased by a few months of contrition. We established a careful relationship, monthly dinners where we discussed everything from my childhood to his own upbringing in a household where emotional expression was discouraged. I never learned how to defend someone I loved against someone else I loved, he confessed during one such dinner. It seemed easier to pretend everything was fine than to confront your mother's behavior or acknowledge Stephanie's cruelty. Easier for whom? I asked. He had no answer, but the question itself represented progress, my ability to challenge him without fear of rejection or abandonment. My mother proved more complicated. After her initial email, she alternated between tentative overtures and renewed attempts at control. When I declined a family therapy session she had unilaterally scheduled without consulting me, she reverted to familiar tactics. After everything that's happened, the least you could do is try, she texted. We're making all the effort here. I showed the message to Dr. Rahman in our next session. Notice the language, she pointed out. The least you could do implies obligation on your part. We're making all the effort positions you as the problem. These are manipulation strategies, not genuine attempts at reconciliation. With this framework, I drafted a response that became my template for family interactions. I'm open to rebuilding our relationship, but only with mutual respect and acknowledgement of past patterns. I'll make decisions about my participation based on what feels healthy for me, not out of obligation or guilt. My mother didn't reply for 3 weeks. When she did, her message was brief but significant. I'm trying to understand. It's not easy. Not an apology, but perhaps the beginning of awareness. Stephanie remained the most distant. After her tear-stained letter, she maintained radio silence until Thanksgiving, when she sent a text from her therapy center. They're making me list things I'm grateful for. I put having a sister who refused to let me keep lying to myself. Still hate you though. I actually laughed out loud, it was so perfectly Stephanie in its backhanded acknowledgement. I replied simply, working on not hating myself anymore. Good luck with your list. As I established these new family boundaries, unexpected allies emerged. My Aunt Sarah invited me to her lake house for a weekend in October, where cousins I barely knew welcomed me without judgment. My Uncle Mark, my father's brother, called regularly to check in. Even my grandmother, who had always seemed to favor Stephanie, sent a handwritten note. I should have seen what was happening. I'm sorry I didn't protect you better. These connections helped fill the void left by my immediate family's dysfunction, proving that biological ties weren't the only form of kinship available to me. Professionally, the aftermath brought unexpected opportunities. While I had feared the wedding video would brand me as unprofessional, it instead showcased my technical skills and emotional intelligence. Clients specifically sought me out for my ability to capture authentic moments and tell compelling stories. You saw through the performance to the real story, one bride told me when booking my services. That's exactly what we want for our wedding. I established clear boundaries in my business as well, creating detailed contracts that specified exactly what I would and wouldn't do. No more family assumptions about my time and talents being freely available. No more devaluing my work or expertise. My personal life flowered in this new soil as well. Free from Stephanie's interference and my parents' disapproval, I began dating without the constant comparison to my sister. In September, I met Daniel, a documentary filmmaker who understood creative passion and respected professional boundaries. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect rather than the desperate need for validation that had characterized my previous romantic connections. "I like how you don't apologize for your success," he told me after watching one of my commercial projects. "You've earned every bit of recognition you're getting." These words, simple affirmation without qualification, brought tears to my eyes. They represented everything my family had never given me: acknowledgement without comparison, praise without subsequent criticism. By December, 6 months after the wedding incident, I had established a life that felt authentically mine. My apartment, once sparsely decorated due to my constant work schedule, became a true home filled with photography books, vintage cameras, and art from local creators. I joined a weekly photographers meetup, building friendships based on shared interests rather than obligation. The holiday season brought inevitable family tensions, but I navigated them with my therapist's guidance. I declined my mother's guilt-laden invitation to Christmas dinner, instead accepting Aunt Sarah's offer to join her family's celebration. I sent my parents and Stephanie simple gifts with cards expressing hope for continued healing in the new year. My father called on Christmas Eve. "Your mother's taking it hard that you won't be here tomorrow," he said. "I'm sure she is," I replied. "But I'm making choices based on what feels healthy for me right now." "I understand," he said after a pause. "Maybe next year will be different." "Maybe," I agreed. "That depends on all of us." This exchange, unremarkable on its surface, represented monumental growth. I had stated my boundary without apology. My father had accepted it without pressure. We had acknowledged the possibility of change without demanding or promising it. As the new year approached, I realized the wedding video revenge, which had once seemed like an endpoint, the climactic conclusion to years of mistreatment, had actually been a beginning. The revelation of truth had created space for authentic relationships, professional confidence, and personal growth that would have been impossible within the confines of my family's toxic dynamics. The journey wasn't complete. There would be setbacks, renewed attempts at manipulation, moments of doubt. But for the first time, I was living my life as the main character rather than a supporting role in Stephanie's story. I was making choices based on self-respect rather than fear of rejection. Most importantly, I was learning that standing up for yourself isn't a single dramatic moment but a daily practice of honoring your own worth, even when no one is watching, even when there's no dramatic video reveal to validate your experience. That quiet, consistent self-advocacy was perhaps the most powerful revenge of all. 1 year after the wedding video that changed everything, I stood backstage at the New York Independent Film Awards, clutching a folder containing my acceptance speech. My documentary short, Framing Family, had been nominated in the Emerging Filmmaker category, a project that had grown organically from my experience with Stephanie's wedding. The film explored how family narratives are constructed and maintained, using interviews with psychologists, estranged family members, and reconciled relatives to examine the stories we tell ourselves about our closest relationships. I had deliberately avoided including my own family drama directly, instead allowing the universal themes to resonate without exploitation. As I waited for my category to be announced, my phone vibrated with a text from Daniel wishing me luck from the audience. We had been dating for 10 months now, our relationship deepening into something I wouldn't have believed possible before the wedding incident, a partnership of equals, without manipulation or power struggles. Another text arrived, surprising me: "Whatever happens tonight, I'm proud of you. Dad." Our relationship had evolved cautiously over the past year. Monthly dinners had become bi-weekly, then weekly conversations. He had moved out of the family home permanently 3 months after the wedding, established his own apartment, and begun the difficult work of examining his role in enabling decades of dysfunctional behavior. While we weren't fully healed, we had established something honest, a father-daughter relationship based on who we actually were, not who we pretended to be. My mother remained more distant. After several failed attempts at reasserting control, she had reluctantly begun working with a therapist specializing in narcissistic personality traits. Our contact was limited to occasional supervised family therapy sessions, where she struggled to acknowledge her role in the family dynamic while making incremental progress toward genuine self-reflection. The host announced my category, and I took a deep breath, centering myself before potential disappointment or success. As the nominees' clips played, I saw my work through the audience's eyes, the careful composition, emotional authenticity, and technical precision that had become my professional signature. And the award goes to Avery Mitchell for Framing Family. The applause was surreal as I walked to the podium, my hands steady despite the adrenaline. I delivered my prepared speech, thanking Daniel, my supportive colleagues, and the subjects who had trusted me with their stories. I concluded with words I had carefully considered, and to my family, who taught me that truth, however difficult, is ultimately the only foundation on which authentic relationships can be built. As I exited the stage, clutching my award, an event coordinator approached. "There's someone asking to see you in the lobby. She says she's your sister." My heart raced as I rounded the corner to find Stephanie standing awkwardly by the water fountain, looking simultaneously familiar and foreign. Her hair was different, shorter, more natural than the carefully highlighted mane she'd maintained for years. She wore minimal makeup, and her outfit was understated compared to her former style. "Congratulations," she said, holding out a small gift bag. I watched the livestream from my apartment. I accepted the bag cautiously. "Thank you for coming. And for this, whatever it is." "It's just a camera lens cleaning kit," she said with a self-conscious laugh. "Probably stupid, but I thought it might be useful." The thoughtful practicality of the gift, so unlike the showy but meaningless presents she'd given in the past, caught me off guard. "How did you know I was nominated?" I asked. "I follow your work online," she admitted. "Have been for months. It's really good, Avery. You deserve to win." We moved to a quiet corner of the lobby, away from the crowds. The conversation was stilted at first, neither of us quite knowing how to interact without our established roles of golden child and scapegoat. "I've been in therapy for 10 months, she offered finally. "Twice a week at first, now once weekly. It's been illuminating." "In what way?" I asked, genuinely curious. She looked down at her hands. "Do you remember when I was born?" "Of course you don't, you were only 3. But Mom and Dad always told the story about how excited you were to have a little sister, how you wanted to help take care of me." I nodded, familiar with this family mythology though I had no actual memory of it. My therapist asked me to explore why our relationship changed so dramatically from that initial connection. "We've been working through some family history, and..." She hesitated. "I found something you should know." From her purse, she withdrew a folded document. "I was looking through Dad's office during one of my visits home. Found this in a locked drawer." I unfolded what appeared to be a birth certificate, my birth certificate. But the names listed under parents weren't Diana and Grant Mitchell. "You're adopted," Stephanie said quietly. "Mom and Dad adopted you when you were 6 months old. They had been told they couldn't conceive naturally." I stared at the document, my mind racing to process this revelation. "And then you came along. 3 years later." "Their miracle baby," Stephanie confirmed. "According to what I pieced together, they never told you because they wanted you to feel like their real daughter. But when I was born, everything changed," I finished. "Mom's always been obsessed with biological legacy," Stephanie continued. She never said it explicitly, but her behavior made it clear. "I became the continuation of the Mitchell line, while you were the outsider," I said, the pieces finally falling into place. "That's why no matter what I did, it was never enough. I wasn't really theirs in Mom's eyes." "It's not an excuse for how they treated you," Stephanie said. "Or how I did. But it helps explain the dynamic." We sat in silence, absorbing the weight of this revelation. All those years of feeling like I didn't belong hadn't been just in my head, they had stemmed from an unspoken truth my parents had buried rather than addressed honestly. "Dad doesn't know I found this," Stephanie added. He's been talking about telling you himself, working up to it in therapy. But I thought you deserved to know now. Thank you, I said, genuinely moved by this act of truth-telling from someone who had spent decades maintaining family fictions. As we talked further, Stephanie revealed her own journey over the past year. The annulment had been finalized. She'd taken a leave of absence from work to focus on therapy. She was living alone for the first time in her life, learning to define herself without external validation. The hardest part, she admitted, is realizing I don't actually know who I am when I'm not being the perfect daughter, the enviable friend, the trophy girlfriend. I've spent my whole life performing for an audience, and now I'm learning to live without the applause. That takes courage, I acknowledged. She laughed. Not as much courage as what you did. Do you know James contacted me recently? He's engaged again, to someone he says is authentic. He thanked me for the wake-up call your video provided. She shook her head. Apparently, I taught him what he doesn't want in a relationship. As our conversation wound down, Stephanie hesitated before asking, do you think we could ever have a real relationship? Not as competitors or enemies, but just sisters? I considered her question carefully. I don't know, I answered honestly. A lot of damage has been done. But I'm open to finding out what kind of relationship might be possible if we both commit to truth and respect. She nodded, accepting this measured response. That's fair. More than fair, actually. As we prepared to part ways, she added, Mom's in residential treatment now. Has been for 2 months. She had a breakdown after Dad moved out permanently. The therapists think she has narcissistic personality disorder with borderline features. Is she improving? I asked. Marginally. On her good days, she acknowledges how her behavior affected us both, me by making me an extension of her ego, you by making you the designated outsider. On bad days, she's still convinced she was a perfect mother and we're both ungrateful. Stephanie sighed. The therapists say people with her condition rarely make dramatic changes, but incremental improvement is possible. We hugged awkwardly before separating, neither of us quite comfortable with physical affection toward each other yet. As she turned to leave, Stephanie looked back. For what it's worth, I think you've always been the strongest one in the family. It just took me 28 years to see it. After she left, I returned to the award ceremony to find Daniel waiting. Everything okay? He asked, noticing my distant expression. I'm not sure, I replied honestly. But I think it might be, eventually. Later that night, in our hotel room, I told him everything, about the birth certificate, the adoption revelation, the conversation with Stephanie. He listened without interruption, holding space for my conflicted emotions. Does knowing change how you feel about the past? He asked finally. I considered his question carefully. It explains things, but it doesn't excuse them. They could have told me the truth, helped me understand my origins while assuring me of my place in the family. Instead, they created this secret that became a wall between us. I fingered the award I'd won, thinking about how far I'd come from that hungry, humiliated woman with dry bread on her plate at Stephanie's wedding. The irony is, learning I'm not biologically a Mitchell actually makes me feel more whole. I've always felt like an outsider in that family. Now I know why. And that it wasn't my imagination or my failure. 2 weeks later, I received an email from a man named Thomas Sawyer who had seen my documentary. He explained that he worked with adoptees searching for their biological families and offered his services if I was interested in exploring my origins. After careful consideration and discussions with my therapist, I decided to begin the search. 3 months of investigation led to a remarkable discovery. My biological mother, Lauren Reed, was a successful photographer living in Seattle. The connection felt almost cosmic, my passion for visual storytelling apparently running deeper than environment or upbringing. Our first meeting was cautious but warm. Lauren had been a 19-year-old art student when she became pregnant. Unable to provide financially, she had made the painful decision to place me for adoption, hoping I would have opportunities she couldn't offer. Not a day went by that I didn't think about you, she told me, showing a box of photographs she'd taken throughout her life, images she'd mentally dedicated to the daughter she hoped would someday find her. I always hoped you were happy, loved, flourishing. Parts of my childhood were difficult, I admitted. But they led me here, to this moment, to finding you. I can't regret the path that brought us together. By the following spring, 18 months after the wedding video that had shattered my family's facade, I found myself in a place I never could have imagined. My documentary had launched a promising career directing projects that explored human relationships with unflinching honesty. Daniel and I had moved in together, building a home based on mutual respect and genuine affection. I maintained a careful, evolving relationship with my father and Stephanie, while keeping appropriate boundaries with my still struggling mother. Most surprisingly, I had developed a meaningful connection with Lauren, my biological mother, whose creative sensibility and quiet strength felt familiar in ways I couldn't articulate. We weren't trying to replace the decades lost, but instead building something new that honored both our separation and our connection. The dry bread incident at Stephanie's wedding, once a symbol of my family's disdain, had transformed in my mind to represent a turning point rather than just a humiliation. It had been the catalyst that forced me to finally reject the scraps of affection and recognition I'd been accepting my entire life. In its place, I had built a banquet of authentic relationships, professional fulfillment, and self-acceptance that nourished me in ways my family of origin never could. The revenge video hadn't just exposed their lies, it had liberated me to discover my own truth. And that, ultimately, was the most satisfying revenge of all. What would you have done in Avery's situation? Would you have created the revenge video, or handled things differently? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've ever experienced family favoritism or needed to set boundaries with toxic relatives, know that you're not alone. Like, subscribe, and share this story if it resonated with you, and remember that sometimes the most powerful act of self-care is simply standing up for your own worth. Thank you for watching, and may you always receive the full banquet of respect and love you deserve, never settling for dry bread crumbs.